Okay, first and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'Hashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem Rakakwadash, and do honors to the apostles, elders, and bishops of Great Millstone. Today we'll be going over Daniel 11, 5, and 6, those two verses. But before we start that, a quick recap. Daniel 11 and 1, conflicts to come. Also, I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I, stood to confirm and to strengthen him. Now, Darius the Mede, historically, is known as Astyages, and he was the grandfather of Cyrus the Great on his mother's side. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Now during this time, the king was Cyrus the Great, and the 3 kings that are yet to stand up were Cambyses II, son of Cyrus the Great, then Bardia, then Darius the Great, which is not to be confused with Darius the Mede. One was a Persian and one was a Mede. And the fourth shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And that fourth king was Xerxes, which was the son of Darius the Great. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Now this mighty king was Alexander the Greek, or Alexander the Great. And when he shall stand up, meaning Alexander will be at the height of his power, his kingdom shall be broken. Because when he died, what happened? His kingdom was divided in those civil wars, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, going into the 4 places that his 4 generals ultimately ended up ruling, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, not to his posterity, because his dominion, his kingdom did not go to his children or his descendants after he ruled. It went to his generals. Nor according to his dominion which he ruled, right, because his generals, they did not rule according to how Alexander wanted. There was certain things, and there was a certain way how he wanted things to be done, but they ruled how they saw fit, not according to his dominion. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those. Okay, now, Daniel 11 verse 5. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. Now, who is the king of the south? Well, looking at the map of the generals, we can see which general, who had what. Ptolemy over here had the land of the blue, Cassander the green, Lysimachus the orange, and Seleucus the yellow. Now, at this point, Ptolemy is actually known as the king of the south. He is the king of the south, Ptolemy the first Soter. Soter meaning savior, and he got that name upon saving the island of Rhodes. Now, the king of the north is Seleucus the first Nicator, Nicator meaning victor. And the king of the south shall be strong. Like I said, this was Ptolemy the first Soter. So now let's read more about Ptolemy. Because Ptolemy the first Soter, he was strong. Ptolemy the first Soter, Ptolemy the savior, was a Macedonian Greek general, historian, and successor of Alexander the Great, who went on to found the Ptolemaic kingdom centered on Egypt. Ptolemy was Basileus and pharaoh of Ptolemaic Egypt from 305-304 BC to his death in 282 BC, and his descendants continued to rule Egypt until 30 BC. During their rule, Egypt became a thriving bastion of Hellenistic civilization, and Alexandria a great seat of Greek culture. Ptolemy I was the son of Arsinoe of Macedon by either her husband Lagus or Philip II of Macedon, the father of Alexander. However, the latter is unlikely and may be a myth fabricated to glorify the Ptolemaic dynasty. Ptolemy was one of Alexander's most trusted companions and military officers, and after Alexander's death, it was this diplomacy and trust and power that Ptolemy ultimately had already built up by being beside Alexander that he used to really gain that portion of Egypt that he had, and then he expanded. After the death of Alexander in 323 BC, Ptolemy retrieved his body as it was en route to be buried in Macedon, placing it in Memphis instead, where it was later moved to Alexandria in a new tomb. Afterwards, he joined a coalition against Perdiccas, the royal regent over Philip III of Macedon. So, Perdiccas, he was the regent, so Perdiccas had the power of king, even though he wasn't, because the true heirs who were supposed to be king, they were incapable. The latter invaded Egypt, but was assassinated by his own officers in 320 BC, which was Perdiccas. He was assassinated, it was mutiny, allowing Ptolemy I to consolidate his control over the country after a series of wars between Alexander's successors, the Wars of the Diadochi. Ptolemy gained a claim to Judea and southern Syria, which was disputed with the Seleucid king Seleucus I. Now, the thing is, Seleucus, along with others, actually orchestrated the mutiny that killed Perdiccas, because Seleucus, he was in Perdiccas' army. He was a part of that army that was under Perdiccas. He also took control of Cyprus and Cyrenaica, which we see here. Ptolemy, here, the area in the blue. Cyrenaica, over here. And Cyprus, here, that island. The latter of which was placed under the control of Ptolemy's stepson, Magus. Ptolemy also commanded the construction of the Library of Alexandria and of the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. So, that's a little more on Ptolemy. Then 11 verse 5 again, and the king of the south shall be strong, which was Ptolemy, and Ptolemy, he was strong. And one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. Now, looking into princes, Sar, we have many definitions: prince, ruler, leader, chief, chieftain, official captain, chieftain, leader, vassal, noble, official under the king, captain, general, commander of military, chief, head, overseer of other official classes, heads, princes of religious office, elders of representative leaders of people, merchant, princes of rank and dignity, patron angel, ruler of rulers of the Most High, and a warden. So we see there are different contexts in which prince can be used. And he even has a patron angel, because there are times when angels are referred to as princes. There's even an example in the very next chapter, the first verse, Daniel 12 verse 1, the time of the end. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to the same time. And at that time that people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found read in the book. So here we see that the archangel Michael was referred to as the great prince. So the word prince can be used in different ways, and here in Daniel 11 and 5, it's being used in the military sense because it's speaking about Seleucus. So why is it being used in the military sense? Well, when we read about Seleucus, we'll see why. Seleucus the first Nicator. Seleucus the Victorious was a Macedonian Greek general, officer, and successor of Alexander the Great, who went on to found the eponymous Seleucid Empire, led by the Seleucid dynasty, initially a secondary player in the power struggles following Alexander's death. Seleucus rose to become the total ruler of Asia Minor, Syria, Mesopotamia, and the Iranian plateau, assuming the title of Basileus the King. Now, back here, it says what? And one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. While looking at the map, we see, Seleucus, he had all of this in yellow. So we see how great of a dominion he had compared to the other Diadochi or the other generals or successors, and what? It also says, and one of his princes, one of Ptolemy's princes, he shall be strong above him. Why was that? Seleucus, he had a greater dominion than Ptolemy did. See, he had all of them beat. So Seleucus, he had the largest portion. That's how great of a dominion he had. Okay. The Seleucid Empire was one of the major powers of the Hellenistic world until it was overcome by the Roman Republic and Parthian Empire in the late 2nd and early 1st centuries BC. While serving under Alexander, Seleucus was commander of the Hypaspiste, an elite Macedonian infantry unit. After the death of Alexander in June 323 BC, Seleucus initially supported Perdiccas, the regent of Alexander's empire, and was appointed commander of the Companions. Now, what was commander of the Companions? The Companions were the elite cavalry of the Macedonian army from the time of King Philip II of Macedon, achieving their greatest prestige under Alexander the Great, and regarded as the first or among the first shock cavalry used in Europe. Chosen companions, or heteroi, formed the elite guard of the king. So, commander of the Companions and Chiliarch is what? A military rank dating back to antiquity. So remember, this is being spoken about Seleucus, that prince. This is showing why the prince being used in Daniel 11:5 is, in the military sense when he's being spoken about Seleucus. So at the partition of Babylon in 323, however, after the outbreak of the wars of the Diadochi in 322, Perdiccas' military failures against Ptolemy in Egypt led to the mutiny of his troops in Pelusium. Perdiccas was betrayed and assassinated in a conspiracy by Seleucus, Python, and Antigenes in Pelusium sometime in either 321 or 320 BC. At the partition of Triparadisus in 321 BC, Seleucus was appointed satrap of Babylon under the new regent Antipater. But almost immediately, the wars between the Diadochi resumed, and one of the most powerful of the Diadochi, Antigonus, forced Seleucus to flee Babylon. Seleucus was only able to return to Babylon in 312 BC with the support of Ptolemy. From 312 BC, Seleucus ruthlessly expanded his dominion and eventually conquered the Persian and Median lands. Seleucus ruled not only Babylonia, but the entire eastern part of Alexander's empire, which once again we see here. All of that east, that's all Seleucus, all of that in yellow. So, going back, it says, and the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him. So it says that Seleucus was one of Ptolemy's princes. So he was one of Ptolemy's what? One of Ptolemy's commanders, generals. And we see that here. Admiral under Ptolemy. So first, what does it mean to be an admiral? admiral. Definition of an admiral: a commander of a fleet or naval squadron, or a naval officer of very high rank. So we read that the definition of an admiral is a commander of a fleet. And we read that one of the definitions here of a prince is what? Captain, general, a commander in the military sense. So that's why prince is being used in the military sense when talking about Seleucus. And Seleucus was actually a commander of one of Ptolemy's fleets. Let's see if I can find here. Seleucus acted as an admiral to Ptolemy during the first phase of the war. Antigonus was besieging Tyre when Seleucus sailed past him and went on to threaten the coast of Syria and Asia Minor. Antigonus allied with the island of Rhodes, which had a strategic location and a navy capable of preventing the allies from combining their forces. Because of the threat of Rhodes, Ptolemy gave Seleucus 100 ships and sent him to the Aegean Sea. Ptolemy gave Seleucus 100 ships and sent him to the Aegean Sea. So Seleucus, he was, commander or captain or the general of one of Ptolemy's fleets. Alright, so now we know about both Ptolemy the first soldier, who was king of the south, and Seleucus the first Nicator, king of the north. And it was actually one of Ptolemy's sons who ended up killing Seleucus. Right here. Seleucus' victories against Antigonus and Lysimachus left the Seleucid dynasty virtually unopposed amongst the Diadochi. However, Seleucus also hoped to take control of Lysimachus' European territories, primarily Thrace and Macedon itself. But upon arriving in Thrace in 281 BC, Seleucus was assassinated by Ptolemy Ceraunus. Ptolemy Ceraunus was a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty and briefly king of Macedon. As the son of Ptolemy the first Soter, he was originally heir to the throne of Ptolemaic Egypt, but he was displaced in favor of his younger brother Ptolemy II Philadelphus. He fled to King Lysimachus of Thrace and Macedon, where he was involved in court intrigue and led to the fall of the kingdom in 281 BC to Seleucus I, whom he then assassinated. So, that's that. Now, Daniel 11:5 once more. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion, and in the end of years they shall join themselves together. For the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begot her, and he that strengthened her in these times. Now, we have to keep in mind that throughout the Bible, there are scriptures and points that they do what? They jump through time. Like, for example, a verse could take place 30 years before the very next verse. So it might seem like it's talking about the same person here in verses 5 and 6, but it's not, because it's not a straight up continuation. Because I know verse 5 it says king of the south, and then verse 6 is talking about the king of the south, but there were multiple ones, because one king of the south, he would die, then his son would become in power, so now his son is king of the south, and most of Daniel 11 is talking about what? The 6 Syrian wars, and Daniel 11 and 6 specifically is talking about the end of that second Syrian war. Okay, so now the Syrian wars were a series of 6 wars between the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt. successor states to Alexander the Great's empire during the 3rd and 2nd series BC over the region then called Kuwal Syria, one of the few avenues into Egypt. These conflicts drained the material and manpower of both parties and led to their eventual destruction and conquest by Rome and Parthia. They are briefly mentioned in the biblical books of the Maccabees. So these were wars over Syria between the king of the south, dealing with the Ptolemies, and the king of the north, dealing with the Seleucids. In the wars of the Diadochi, following Alexander's death, Kuwal Syria initially came under the rule of Antigonus I Monophthalmus. Now, he was one of the generals. He actually had the biggest portion, but he was later defeated at the Battle of Ipsus by the coalition formed between the other generals, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, Cassander, and Seleucus. And after they defeated him, they split his territory, which is why Seleucus, he has, all of that over there. In 301 BC, Ptolemy I Soter, who 4 years earlier had crowned himself king of Egypt, exploded events surrounding the Battle of Ipsus to take control of the region. The victors at Ipsus, however, had allocated Kuwal Syria to Ptolemy's former ally, Seleucus I Nicator. Founder of the Seleucid Empire, Seleucus, who had been aided by Ptolemy during his ascent to power, did not take any military action to reclaim the region. Once both were dead, however, their successors became embroiled in war. So, we see here, this over here in blue, and Kuwal Syria over here. This was supposed to go to Seleucus, but Ptolemy, he takes advantage of everything that's going on at the time and claims it for himself. And Seleucus, he knows this, but he didn't act upon it because, Ptolemy, it said they were former allies, and Ptolemy helped Seleucus get to where he was. So Seleucus is just, he just overlooked it. But yeah, he doesn't act upon it, but eventually their sons come into power, and that's where things take a turn. That's where, the wars break out. Starting with the First Syrian War. A decade into his rule, Ptolemy II, who was Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who was the son of Ptolemy I Soter, faced Antiochus I, which is Antiochus I Soter, who was son of Seleucus I Nicator. Antiochus I Soter, right? And Philadelphus meaning sibling lover. Alright, so the Seleucid king, who was trying to expand his empire's holdings in Syria and Anatolia. So these are the sons of those two kings who had a reason to go to war with each other, but they didn't. But here it says, a decade into his rule, Ptolemy II faced Antiochus I, the Seleucid king, who was trying to expand his empire's holding in Syria and Anatolia, which Antiochus would really be right to do so because originally it belonged to his father. That Syria, and Anatolia, those parts, they belonged to his father. But since Ptolemy I took control of it, Ptolemy II inherited it when he came to power. So he wasn't just gonna sit there and let Antiochus, come take it. He wasn't just gonna sit there and let that happen. Ptolemy proved to be a forceful ruler and skilled general. In addition, his recent marriage to his court-wise sister Arsinoe II of Egypt had stabilized the volatile Egyptian court, allowing Ptolemy to successfully carry on the campaign The First Syrian War was a major victory for the Ptolemies, and Antiochus took the Ptolemaic-controlled areas in coastal Syria and southern Anatolia in his initial rush. So, Antiochus, what he came to take here is in southern Anatolia, with Anatolia's Asia Minor. So here, in coastal Syria, here, which, it led to war. Ptolemy reconquered these territories by 271 BC, extending Ptolemaic rule as far as Caria and into most of Cilicia, which Caria is over here, west of Asia Minor or Anatolia, and here we have Cilicia. With Ptolemy's eye focused eastward, his half-brother Magus declared his province of Cyrenaica to be independent. It would remain independent until 250 BC, when it was reabsorbed into the Ptolemaic kingdom, but not before having triggered a sequence of Ptolemaic and Seleucid court intrigues, war, and ultimately leading to the marriage of Theos and Berenice, which is what's being spoken about here in verse 6. So, that marriage between Theos and Berenice. So, in Daniel 11:5, we have Ptolemy the first Soter, who was king of the south, and Seleucus the first Nicator, who was king of the north, who already, they were already acquainted. So they didn't get anything. They didn't have a fight. They didn't start any wars. But after them, between the time of verses 5 and 6, you have Ptolemy II Philadelphus and Antiochus the first Soter, who go to war, which is that first Syrian war, and Ptolemy wins. So now we have the second Syrian war. Second Syrian War, 260 to 253 BC. Antiochus the second. This second Syrian War, here is where Ptolemy the first Philadelphus, Ptolemy the second Philadelphus, Slakia, goes to war with Antiochus the second Theos. So Antiochus the second Theos succeeded his father in 261 BC, and thus began a new war for Syria. He reached an agreement with the current Antigonid king in Macedon, Antigonus II Gonatas, who was also interested in pushing Ptolemy II out of the Aegean. So, Ptolemy has area over here in the Aegean, and we know that Antiochus II Theos wants Ptolemy out of here. So he teams up with Antigonus II Gonatas, who's over here in Macedon, who wants Ptolemy out of here. So Antigonus, he's basically like, you want him out of here, and I want him out of here. So of course I'll help you, because at the end of the day, I'm helping myself, so why not? And then, they had that second Syrian War. With Macedon's support, Antiochus II launched an attack on Ptolemaic outposts in Asia. Most of the information about the Second Syrian War has been lost. It is clear that Antigonus's fleet defeated Ptolemies at the Battle of Kos in 261 BC, diminishing Ptolemaic naval power. Ptolemy appears to have lost ground in Cilicia, Pamphylia, and Ionia, while Antiochus regained Miletus and Ephesus. Macedon's involvement in the war ceased when Antigonus became preoccupied by the rebellion of Corinth and Chalcis in 253 BC, possibly instigated by Ptolemy, as well as an increase in enemy activity along Macedon's northern frontier. The war was concluded around 253 BC, which brings us to back to Daniel 11 verse 6, where it says here, and in the end of the years they shall join themselves together. Because that was the conclusion of the Second Syrian War. The war was concluded around 253 BC with the marriage of Antiochus to Ptolemy's daughter Berenice Sira, and Antiochus being Antiochus II Theos, and Berenice Sira being the daughter of Ptolemy II Philadelphus. Antiochus repudiated his previous wife, Laodice, and turned over a substantial domain to her. He died in Ephesus in 246 BC, poisoned by Laodice, according to some sources. Ptolemy II died in the same year. So here we read it says, and in the end of years they shall join themselves together. And this was the end of the Second Syrian War, and they joined themselves together as a mean of ending the war. It was like a peace treaty. For the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. Right? So Ptolemy II, who was king of the south, and his daughter Berenice Sira came to Antiochus II Theos, who was king of the north, to make an agreement through what? Through marriage. So she was gonna marry him as a means of like a peace treaty. To make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. So, what happened was Antiochus II Theos had to divorce his first wife Laodice in order to marry Berenice for their agreement to actually stand, where Berenice's son would be the rightful heir. But then he goes back to Laodice, right? So it says, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, because the agreement where Berenice marries him and her son becomes king is now dying. It's failing because Antiochus left. Neither shall he stand, nor his arm, because when Antiochus II, he comes back to Laodice, she does what? She poisoned him and he dies. But she shall be given up, because Laodice had Berenice and her son killed as well. And he that begot her, and they that brought her, and he that begot her, because Berenice's father, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, he also dies, even though it had nothing to do with them. Like, he wasn't killed by them, he still dies. And he that strengthened her in these times. So now we're gonna read about that, through the history sense. Antiochus II Theos, meaning Antiochus the god, was a great king of the Hellenistic Seleucid Empire who reigned from 261 to 246 BC. He succeeded his father Antiochus I Soter in the winter of 262. Okay. Reign. Okay, here. He inherited lasting tensions with Ptolemaic Egypt, and soon initiated the Second Syrian War in alliance with Antigonus II of the Antigonid dynasty, which we just spoke about. Get to the main point. Here, in 253 BC, with his Antigonid allies knocked out of the war by rebellions, Antiochus II made peace with Ptolemy II. As part of the settlement, Antiochus II divorced Laodice and married Ptolemy's daughter Berenice, which is what we read about in this part here, in Daniel 11 and 6, where it says, and in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. you know, with the understanding that any children born from their union would inherit the Seleucid throne. This was their agreement or the power of the arm. But what does it say here in Daniel 11:6? But she shall not retain the power of the arm. And we're about to read why. Laodice was well provided for in the divorce arrangement. Antiochus II gave her various land grants throughout Anatolia, which are known through inscriptions, such as large estates in the Hellespont, other properties near Cyzicus, Ilion, and Caria. She was also granted revenues from various territories and tax exemptions. According to a royal record at Sardis, her land titles were to be treated as in royal possession. Laodice remained a very powerful and political influential figure and continued numerous intrigues to become queen again. By 246 BC, possibly at the news of Ptolemy II's death, Antiochus II had left Berenice and their infant son Antiochus in Antioch to live again with Laodice in Asia Minor. And this is why Berenice didn't retain the power of the arm. The agreement failed because Antiochus II left her. Right? So, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand nor his arm. And why was that? Well, that was because Antiochus II dies. Antiochus II soon suddenly died, and Laodice was widely accused of having him poisoned. Antiochus was buried in Bellevue Mausoleum. A succession struggle erupted almost immediately. Berenice initially had the advantage by holding Antioch, but her son Antiochus was but an infant. Meanwhile, Laodice proclaimed her eldest son Seleucus as King Seleucus II and moved in from Asia Minor, claiming that on his deathbed, Antiochus II reversed his earlier decision and named Seleucus as his successor. The then reigning brother of Berenice, Ptolemy III, marched from Egypt to support his sister, only to find her and her son murdered by partisans of Laodice. So, the agreement fails because Antiochus II leaves Berenice for his previous wife Laodice, who ends up then killing him. But she shall be given up, right? Because that same previous wife Laodice has Berenice put to death. And they that brought her, and he that begot her, because once again, Philip II Philadelphus, he dies as well. Even though it had, it wasn't due to them, he still died. And he that begot her, and he that strengthened her in these times, because not only did Laodice have Berenice put to death, but her infant son too. And yeah, that's Daniel 11:6. Daniel 11:5 and 6. So Daniel 11:6, it goes into the end of that second Syrian war and how their agreement fails. Berenice and her son is killed. Antiochus II Theos is killed. Philip II Philadelphus dies. And the things that spark that third Syrian war, which you read here. The then reigning brother of Berenice, Ptolemy III, marched from Egypt to support his sister, only to find her and her son murdered by partisans of Laodice. Enraged, Ptolemy continued the war, dubbed the Third Syrian War, which proved to be a disaster for the Seleucid Empire. So, that being said, I would like once more to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai Ba'Shem Rakah Kodash, and double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and Shalom.